Hello, y'all. Today we are listening to The Swiss Family Robinson by Joan Weiss. And we today are on chapter 14. Hopefully you guys have been able to maybe get a copy or read along with me. This is, like I said, this is a very good book. I enjoy it a lot. This is chapter 14, The Pinnace and the Petard. Having now discovered how to provide bread for my family, my thoughts began to revert to the wreck and all the valuables yet contained within it. Above all, I was bent on acquiring possession of that beautiful pinnace. Aware that our united efforts would be required to do the necessary work, I began to coax and persuade the mother to let me go in force with all her boys except Franz. She very unwillingly gave her consent at last, but not until I had faithfully promised never to pass a night on board. I did so with reluctance, and we parted, neither feeling quite satisfied with the arrangement. The boys were delighted to go in so large a party, and merrily carried provisions, bags filled with cassava bread and potatoes. Reaching Safety Bay without adventure, we first paid a visit to the geese and ducks which inhabited the marsh there, and having fed them and seen they were thriving well, we buckled on each his cork belt, stepped into the tub boat, and, with a raft in tow, steered straight for the wreck. When we got on board, I desired the boys to collect whatever came first to hand, and load the raft to be ready for our return at night. And then we made a minute inspection of the pinnace. I came to the conclusion that difficulties, well nigh insuperable, lay between me and the safe possession of the beautiful little vessel. She lay in a most ungettable position at the farther end of the hold, stowed in so confined and narrow a space that it was impossible to think of fitting the parts together there. At the same time, these parts were so heavy that removing them to a convenient place, piece by piece, was equally out of the question. I sent the boys away to assume themselves by rummaging out anything they liked to carry away, and sat down quietly to consider the matter. As my eyes became used to the dim light which entered the compartment through a chink or crevice here and there, I perceived how carefully every part of the pinnace was arranged and marked with numbers, so that if only I could bestow sufficient time on the work and contrive space in which to execute it, I might reasonably hope for success. Room to work in, boys. That's what we need in the first place, I cried as my sons came to see what plan I had devised. For so great was their reliance on me that they never doubted the pinnace was to be ours. Fetch axes, and let us break down the compartment and clear space all around. To work we all went, yet evening drew near, and but little impression had been made on the mass of woodwork around us. We had to acknowledge that an immense amount of labor and perseverance would be required before we could call ourselves the owners of this useful and elegant little craft, which lay within the vast bulk like a fossil shell embedded in the rock. Preparations for returning to shore were hastily made, and we landed without much relish for the long walk to Falconhurst. To our great surprise and pleasure, we found the mother and little Franz at Tentholm awaiting us. She had resolved to take up her quarters there during the time we should be engaged on the wreck. In that way, you will live nearer your work, and I shall not quite lose sight of you, said she, with a pleasant smile. You are a good, sensible, kind wife, I exclaimed, delighted with her plan, and we shall work with a greater diligence that you may return as soon as possible to your dear Falconhurst. "Come and see what we have brought you, mother," cried Fritz. "A good addition to your stores, is it not?" He and his brothers exhibited 2 small casks of butter, 3 or 4 corn, rice, and many other articles welcome to our careful housewife. Our days were now spent in hard work on board, first cutting and clearing an open space round the pinnace, and then putting the parts together. We started early and returned at night, bringing each time a valuable freight from the old vessel. At length, with incredible labor, all was completed. The pinnace stood actually ready to be launched, but imprisoned within massive wooden walls which defied our strength. It seemed exactly as though the graceful vessel had awakened from sleep and was longing to spring into the free blue sea and spread her wings to the breeze. I could not bear to think that our success so far should be followed by failure and disappointment. Yet no possible means of setting her free could I conceive, and I was almost in despair when an idea occurred to me. If I could carry it out, would effect her release without further labor or delay. Without explaining my purpose, I got a large cast-iron mortar, filled it with gunpowder, secured a block of oak to the top, through which I pierced a hole for the insertion of the match, and this great petard I so placed that when it exploded should blow outside of the vessel next to which the pinnace lay. Then, securing it with chains, that the recoil might do no damage, I told the boys I was going ashore earlier than usual, and calmly desired them to get into the boat. Then, lighting a match I had prepared, and which would burn some time before reaching the powder, I hastened after them with a beating heart, and we made for the land. We brought the raft close inshore and began to unload it. The other boat I did not haul up, but kept her ready to put off at a moment's notice. My anxiety was unobserved by anyone, as I listened with strained nerves for the expected sound. It came, a flash, a mighty roar, a grand burst of smoke. My wife and children, terror-stricken, turned their eyes toward the sea, whence the startling noise came, and then, in fear and wonder, looked to me for some explanation. "Perhaps," said the mother, as I did not speak, "perhaps you have left a light burning near some of the gunpowder, and an explosion has taken place?" "Not at all unlikely," replied I quietly. "We had a fire below, when we were caulking the seams of the pinnace. I shall go off at once and see what has happened. Will anyone come?" The boys needed no second invitation, but sprang into the boat, while I lingered to reassure my wife by whispering a few words of explanation, and then joining them, we pulled for the wreck at a more rapid rate than we ever had done before. No alteration had taken place in the side at which we usually boarded her, and we pulled round to the farther side, when a marvelous sight awaited us. A huge rent appeared. The decks and bulwarks were torn open. The water was covered with floating wreckage. All seemed in ruins, and the compartment where the pinnace rested was fully revealed to view. There sat the little beauty, to all appearance uninjured. The boys, whose attention was taken up with the melancholy scene of ruin and confusion around them, were astonished to hear me shout in enthusiastic delight, "Hurrah! She is ours! The lovely pinnace is won! We shall be able to launch her easily after all. Come, boys, let us see if she has suffered from the explosion which has set her free." The boys gazed at me for a moment, and then, guessing my secret, "You planned it yourself? You clever, cunning father! Oh, that machine we helped you make was on purpose to blow it up?" cried they. Eagerly they followed me into the shattered opening, where, to my instant satisfaction, I found everything as I could wish, and the captive in no way suffer from the violent measures I had adopted for her deliverance. It was evident that the launching could now be effected without much trouble. I had been careful to place rollers beneath the keel so that by means of levers and pulleys we might, with our united strength, move her forward toward the water. A rope was attached by which to regulate the speed of the descent, and then, all hands putting their shoulders to the work, the pinnace began to slide from the stocks, and finally slipped gently and steadily into the water, where she floated as if conscious it was her native element, while we, wild with excitement, cheered and waved enthusiastically. We then only remained long enough to secure our prize carefully at the most sheltered point and went back to Tentholm, where we accounted for the explosion, saying that having blown away one side of the ship, we should be able to obtain the rest of its contents with a very few more days' work. These days were devoted to completing the rigging, the mounting of her 2 little brass guns, and all necessary arrangements about the pinnace. It was wonderful what martial ardor was awakened by the possession of a vessel armed with 2 real guns. The boys chattered incessantly about savages, fleets of canoes, attack, defense, and finally annihilation of the invaders. The pinnace was fully equipped and ready to sail, while yet no idea of the surprise we were preparing for her had dawned upon my wife, and I permitted the boys, who had kept the secret so well, to fire a salute when we entered the bay. Casting off from the ship and spreading the sail, our voyage began. The pinnace glided swiftly through the water. I stood at the helm. Ernst and Jack manned the guns, and Fritz gave the word of command. Fire! Bang! Bang! Rattled out a thrilling report, which echoed and re-echoed among the cliffs, followed by our shouts and hurrahs. The mother and her little boy rushed hastily forward from near the tent, and we could plainly see their alarm and astonishment. But speedily recognizing us, they waved joyfully and came quickly to the landing place to meet us. By skillful management, we brought the pinnace near a projection of the bank, and Fritz assisted his mother to come on board, where, breathless with haste and excitement, she exclaimed, "You dear, horrid, wonderful people! Shall I scold you or praise you? You have frightened me out of my wits. To see a beautiful little ship come sailing in was startling enough, for I could not conceive who might be on board. But the report of your guns made me tremble with fear, and I had not recognized your voices directly after. I should have ran away with Franz, heaven knows where. But have you already done all this work yourselves?" she continued, when we had been forgiven for the terrifying her with our vainglorious salute. "What a charming little yacht! I should not be afraid to sail in this myself." After the pinnace had been shown off and received the admiration she deserved, while our industry, skill, and perseverance met with boundless praise, "Now," said my wife, "you must come with me and see how little Franz and I have improved our time every day of your absence." We all landed, and with great curiosity followed the mother up the river toward the cascade. There, to our astonishment, we found a garden neatly laid out in beds and walks. She continued, "We don't frighten people by firing salutes in honor of our performances, although, by and by, I too shall want to fire in a peninsular form. Look at my beds of lettuce and cabbages, my rows of beans and peas. Think what delicious dinners I shall be able to cook for you, and give my credit for my diligence." "My dear wife," I exclaimed, "this is beautiful. You have done wonders. Did you not find the work too hard? The ground is light and easy to dig hereabouts, she replied. I have planted potatoes and kavasa roots. There is a space for sugar cane and the young fruit trees, and I shall want you to contrive to irrigate them by leading water from the cascades in hollow bamboos. Up by the sheltering rocks, I mean to have pineapples and melons. They will look splendid when they are spread there, to shelter the beds of European vegetables from the heat of the sun. I have planted seeds of maize round them. The shadow of the tall plants will afford protection from the burning rays. Do you think that is a good plan? I do indeed. The whole arrangement is capital. Now, as sunset approaches, we must return to the tents for supper and rest, for both of which we are quite ready. So I'm curious what their little boat that they were able to put together and free looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and see if I can Google this. Pinnace. And we will switch to images. Oh, wow. So, there are a few of those, and they all look to be, that was a Pinnace ship boat. Let's see. Let's see, this one is a 32-foot Pinnace. And when fully put together, so I dare say that looks like a very fun ship, a very fun boat. Huh. Here you go. That was a Sid Meier's game. But I think with a ship like that, I wonder what they are planning to do. Give your ideas and comments down below to see what you think they are planning to do with that boat. I wonder if they've got any more stuff on the larger ship that they brought over or not. Anyway, go ahead and leave your comments down below. Let me know your kind of questions, your answers about what's going on. And thank you guys so very much. You have a wonderful and blessed day.